You remember the silence, not peaceful silence, the specific silence of a house with no one in it, the hum of the refrigerator, the sound of cartoons you put on just to fill the room, the way afternoon light moved across the floor while you waited for a car in the driveway that wouldn't come for hours. You were maybe 8, maybe 10, old enough to manage, young enough to still want someone there. So you managed. You made the snack. You started the homework. You handled whatever came up because handling things was simply what you did. Nobody taught you that. Nobody needed to. You just learned that waiting for help was slower than figuring it out yourself. And now you have a child of your own. And when something is wrong, when something feels off, you notice before anyone else does. You show up before you're asked. You stay longer than necessary. People call it overprotective, intense, too much, but they don't know where it comes from. They don't know what you're quietly making up for. Research estimates that as many as 40% of Gen Xers grew up as latchkey kids, according to data cited across multiple generational studies. Children who came home to empty houses, supervised by no one, responsible for themselves and sometimes younger siblings during the hours adults now consider the highest risk part of a child's day. 40%. Not a small number, not an edge case. Nearly half a generation learning that self-sufficiency was not a choice, but a condition. And here's what nobody tells you about growing up that way. It works, until it doesn't. The independence builds something real. You learn to think on your feet. You develop a tolerance for uncertainty that most people never acquire. You stop expecting rescue and start expecting yourself. Those are genuine strengths, earned ones. But underneath those strengths, something else was also being built. A quiet belief that needing people is a kind of weakness, that asking for help is an imposition, that your job is to handle it, whatever it is, and handle it without making it anyone else's problem. You carried that belief into adulthood without questioning it. It felt like character. It felt like something to be proud of. And then you became a parent, and you started to see it differently. There's a concept in developmental psychology called the corrective emotional experience. It describes what happens when a person who lacked something essential in childhood works deliberately to provide it for someone else. Not to spoil them, not to compensate in unhealthy ways, but out of a specific and informed understanding of what that absence cost. Gen X parents aren't hovering. They're correcting. They know the precise weight of coming home to an empty room. They know what it does to a child's nervous system to learn day after day that they are on their own. They know because their nervous systems still carry the residue of it. So when their child is struggling, they show up, completely, without hesitation. Not because they read that in a parenting book, because they remember the alternative. But this is where it gets complicated, because Gen X doesn't want to raise fragile children either. They remember what the independence gave them, the resourcefulness, the ability to sit with discomfort without falling apart, the understanding that life doesn't always rearrange itself around your feelings. They want their children to have that. They want them to struggle with the right things in the right amounts and come out the other side knowing they can handle difficulty. So they hold back when they should hold back. They watch. They wait. They let the smaller failures happen because they understand that smaller failures are where competence gets built. But let something genuinely threatening appear and they transform completely. Researchers who study generational parenting patterns have described this as a stealth approach, not the constant vigilance of a hovering parent, not the detachment of their own parents. Something more precise. Absence when absence serves the child. Presence when presence is what the moment requires. From the outside, it looks inconsistent. From the inside, it's the most intentional thing they do. The problem is that nobody sees the inside. Their own parents look at them and see softness. A generation going too easy on kids who should be learning to toughen up the way they had to toughen up. Their kids sometimes look at them and see rigidity. rules that feel arbitrary, expectations that feel old-fashioned. And Gen X parents stand in the middle of that, absorbing criticism from both directions, trying to build something neither generation showed them how to build. A home where someone is actually there, emotionally, not just physically present in a room, but actually tuned in, actually paying attention to what's happening underneath the surface. They're learning that in real time, without a model, without anyone to call and ask how they did it, because the people who should have shown them were also figuring things out. And here's the part that sits quietly underneath all of it. The grief. Not loud grief, not the kind anyone talks about. The private, late-night kind that arrives when the house is finally still and you're lying there wondering if you did enough today. Whether you were present enough, warm enough. Whether your child will remember this year and feel held, or whether they'll remember it the way you remember yours. That fear is specific to Gen X parents. It's not abstract parenting anxiety. It's personal. It's memory-based. It knows exactly what it's afraid of repeating because it lived the original version. McCrindle Research Centre described Gen X as the first cohort to grow up without a large adult presence, with both parents working. The first, which means they had no generation before them who had already worked out how to parent differently. No template, no roadmap. They're doing something genuinely new, taking the self-reliance and keeping it, taking the emotional absence and refusing to pass it down, trying to give their children both the roots and the wings, knowing what it costs to grow up with only one of those things. That's not overprotection. That's precision. That's a generation who understood deprivation so specifically that they can distinguish between protecting a child and limiting one, between showing up and hovering, between being present and being suffocating. They don't always get it right. Nobody does. But they're getting it right for reasons that run deeper than philosophy or trend or whatever parenting style is fashionable this decade. They're getting it right because they know what wrong felt like. From the inside, at 8 years old, alone in a quiet house, waiting. They promised themselves, somewhere in those hours, that their child would never have to learn patience the way they did. And every time they show up, they're keeping that promise. Not the perfect parent, not the absent one, the one who remembered and decided that was enough reason to stay. If this was you, if you recognize this parent or if you were this child, let me know in the comments. You're not as alone in this as you think.